Hello and welcome everyone to my Commander deck tech for Daretti, Master of Spaghetti. This deck uses Daretti, Scrap Savant as the commander. Before I go into the deck tech, why don't I go over my history with Daretti. He's the second Commander deck that I ever owned. I obtained him from the Commander 2014 built from scratch pre-constructed deck, so I've played and upgraded the deck for a couple of years now. Resilience. That's the first word that comes to mind when I think of this deck. It will shrug off board wipe after board wipe, removal spell after removal spell, and counter spell after counter spell. The deck achieves this using artifact recursion, either through Daretti's -2 or through other spells like Trading Post, Scrap Mastery, Goblin Welder, Junk Diver, or Mirror Retriever. Daretti is a peculiar commander, and here's why. First off, he's a Planeswalker, one of only 5 that can be your commander. Having a Planeswalker as your commander changes how you play. You need to always have blockers to protect your Planeswalker, and you can't depend on commander damage to defeat opponents. Second off, he's a control deck commander in the color least adept for control. The red in the deck is just a support color for your main color, colorless. I think of this deck as being a 2-color deck instead of a mono-color deck, which allows you to dodge cards like Iona, Shield of Emeria better than other monocolored decks. Third off, Daretti is a pure value creation general. He doesn't do any damage on his own. Instead, he makes your deck run better with his +2, and he cheats artifacts in play from the graveyard using his -2. The deck's power comes from how much you can abuse Daretti's Planeswalker abilities and the deck's many layers of synergy. Here are the pros to playing the deck. Daretti's +2 gives you card selection, a rare effect for red, that also feeds into his -2. Daretti's -2 allows you to cheat in artifacts from your graveyard to play. This allows you to dodge the high mana cost of powerful artifacts, and frees up your mana for other spells. Daretti's emblem will easily win you the game, as long as your opponents are stupid enough to let you get his emblem. The deck's resilience to removal is impressive, even when compared to other graveyard recursion based decks. Here are the cons to playing the deck. This is a monocolored deck, so it inherits all the weaknesses of the color, which for red is the inability to deal with enchantments efficiently, and the inability to deal with spells on the stack, something reserved for blue counter spells, the exception being Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. The deck obviously can't kill with commander damage. There are no infinite combos, although there are some combos that lock your opponents out of the game, which I'll go over later in the combo section of this video. Like most graveyard-based strategies, this deck can be crippled by graveyard hate. The deck has a high average CMC of 4.11. This is to take advantage of the fact that Daretti can cheat the high-costed artifacts into play using his -2. However, having a high average CMC still comes with its downsides. This is an artifact-heavy deck, so the deck's ramp package should be focused on the most powerful colors mana-producing mana rocks we can get our hands on. Cage Sun is a great option in most monocolored decks. It's an artifact worth cheating into play using Daretti's -2, especially since that will free up your mana to take advantage of the ×2 mana that you get off Cage Sun. I know what you're probably thinking. Why the heck is this freaking moron running Failwar Stone in a monocolored deck? Well, Daretti is a 4-drop, so we want our mana rocks to be 2 or less mana, so you can play Daretti turn 3. And Failwar Stone is one of the few 2 CMC mana rocks that come into play untapped. This is a monocolored deck, so we don't have access to the usual 2 CMC mana rocks like the Signets and the Talismans. Hedron Archive is mediocre as ramp, especially when compared to Thran Dynamo. However, it can draw cards, and card draw is hard to come by in red. So when you combine mediocre ramp and decent card draw into a card, you get one solid card. Mana Vault in an average deck is a colorless ritual that hurts you during your upkeep for the rest of the game. However, in this deck it ramps you, enabling a turn 2 Daretti, and gives you the perfect sacrifice for Daretti's -2. Mindstone is a mini Hedron Archive that's at the perfect mana cost to enable a turn 3 Daretti. I wonder if Soul Ring is good in an artifact heavy commander deck. No, it's only good in every commander deck. Red can't deal with enchantments, so this deck has to run inefficient ways to deal with them, like Unstable Obelisk. Wayfarer's Bauble. Well, we can't use Rampant Growth, so we have to use this piece of trash instead. Burnished Heart. Well, we can't use Kadama's Reach or Cultivate, so we have to use this piece of trash instead. Ugh. Struggle to point a deck without green. Myriad Landscape is a ramp spell attached to a land. This card is pretty solid in any monocolored deck. Solemn does two things this deck wants. First, it ramps, and second, it's perfect sacrifice fodder for Daretti's -2. There's a reason why Metalworker used to be banned. No other mana dork at 3 CMC or less comes close to the amount of mana this guy can tap for. The following is a guideline to calculate how much mana this guy will tap for on average. 46 out of the 98 possible cards in the deck are artifacts, excluding Metalworker, so there's a 46.94% chance that any card in your hand could be an artifact. So in a hand with 7 cards in it, on average, 3.9 of them will be artifacts, meaning on average, Metalworker will tap for 6.57 mana when you have a hand of 7 cards, and so on. The deck uses what little efficient removal there is available in red, and it uses some sloppy colorless removal spells. However, when removal is recurable, even if it's clunky, it can do some real damage to your opponent's board. Nev's Disc is a clunky board wipe in an average deck. However, with this deck's ability to recur for repeated board wipes, and its synergy with a card like Darksteel Forge, it becomes one of the most devastating cards for your opponents to face. It seems like Spine of Ishtar was made to be in a Daretti deck. It can hit any permanent, and it's the perfect sacrifice outlet for Daretti's -2. Unstable Obelisk is the clunky version of Spine of Ishtar, but I'll reiterate, you need any way you can to deal with enchantments to make up for Red's inability to do so. All Is Dust is the perfect board wipe for this deck. There are only a handful of red permanents in the deck, so this board wipe is going to hurt your opponents more than you. Blasphemous Act is the only board wipe in the game that's 1 mana, and it being 1 mana allows you to build your board back up the same turn you use it. One of the advantages of playing a mono red deck is the opportunity to play land destruction like Ruination. This card will destroy a lot of land, and may even knock players with greedy mana bases out of the game. Scrap Mastery is the artifact version of Living Death. It's one of the most powerful spells in the deck, just an absolute game ender. Vandal Blast is an auto-include in any deck running red. A one-sided artifact board wipe is powerful for any strategy. Bosch can sacrifice artifacts to snipe your opponent's creatures. However, you're probably better off doing direct damage to your opponents and using him as a game ender. Duplicate exiles problematic creatures, and remember, you can assume that all of your artifacts' ETB effects may trigger multiple times since you can keep recurring them. You can use Steel Hellkite's third ability to deal with any problematic permanents. I'd prioritize enchantments, since this deck has so much trouble removing them. Chaos Warp is one of the more creative and powerful ways red deals with permanents. I'd only recommend using this in emergencies, since there's a chance that your opponent will get something even scarier than the permanent you hit. Blue is all over the place in Commander, so Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast should be useful and unexpected. Worst case scenario, you can discard them to Daretti's +2 if no one is running blue. Ujin's -X works much like All Is Dust, and his +2 allows you to lightning bolt a creature or player. Even though Daretti's +2 gives us card selection and puts cards into our secondary hand, our graveyard, the deck still needs card draw, or you'll end up in top deck mode. Alhemerit's Archive turns Daretti's +2 into discard up to 2 cards, draw that many times 2, netting you up to 2 cards. Plus the double life gain is useful for cards like Wormcoil Engine and Inventor's Fair. Hedron Archive and Mindstone can draw you cards, and they can be recurred back later for some more card draw. Ring of 3 Wishes is a mediocre tutor that isn't playable in most decks. However, this deck needs as many tutors as it can get its grubby hands on, and the card becomes great sacrifice fodder when you run out of wish counters. I'm surprised that Trading Post isn't under every category. This card does everything, including drawing cards. The ETB effect on Combustible Gearhulk is a win-win. You either get to draw 3 cards, or your opponents take damage and you just recur any artifacts that went to the graveyard. Gamble is Red's version of Entomb. Every once in a while you might, if you're really lucky, get to keep the cards you searched for. Well, your graveyard is your second hand, so if you discard an artifact, you can recur it onto the battlefield. Again, we'll take any tutor that we can get our grubby hands on, and Hoarding Dragon's the artifact tutor that we need. You'll just have to hope that he actually dies and doesn't get exiled or something else stupid. Kaldalfa Forge Master's Daretti on steroids. You need 3 artifacts to sacrifice, but you get to look through your entire library for an artifact, not just your graveyard. Squeak! Now why the fuck would someone want to use this useless piece of excrement? Well, I'll tell you why. He's great discard fodder for Daretti's +2. He just comes back during your next upkeep to serve his master's command again of flying head first into the graveyard over and over again. Getting 3 artifacts on the battlefield for Inventor's Fair is an easy feat for this deck, especially for such a powerful tutor effect. Sanctum of Ugin is meant to grab Eldrazi, but it also works in artifact decks since artifacts count as colorless creatures, and we have plenty of powerful colorless creatures to choose from. Daretti is the main way the deck recurs artifacts, however that doesn't mean you shouldn't use other recursion spells along with them. Codex Shredder is used mainly to mill yourself, or punish players that tutor cards on top of their deck using a card like Vampiric Tutor or Mystical Tutor. However, this card can also put any card from your graveyard into your hand. It's one of the only recursion spells in the deck that can interact with non-artifact cards in this fashion. Crucible of Worlds lets you get back the lands you discard with Daretti's +2, and it lets you abuse utility lands like Command Beacon, Inventor's Fair, Sanctum of Ugin, and Buried Ruin with repeated activations. You can use Trading Post to sacrifice a creature to get back an artifact to your hand, and Trading Post is kind enough to provide a goat to sacrifice at the cost of 1 life. Scrap Mastery is the ultimate recursion spell. It's just as devastating in this deck as Living Death would be in a deck built around your graveyard. Goblin Welder was Daretti before Daretti was cool. Having redundant Daretti -2 ability at instant speed is almost broken in this deck. Junk Diver and Mirror Retriever are great sacrifice fodder that also get an artifact when they die. They're kind of a 2-for-1 deal. For 4 mana and tapping Scarecrow, you can cheat any artifact from your graveyard to play. Buried Ruin is an emergency recursion effect. I'd only recommend using it in a pinch. These are the creatures that will give your opponents a hard time as they desperately try to keep them off the battlefield. Bosch Iron Golem is the Grim Reaper for any opponent at a single-digit life total, and he's a great sacrifice outlet that can protect your artifacts from exile effects. A 6/6 first strike is nothing to scoff at, especially if an opponent is foolish enough to take the damage off the Gearhulk's ETB ability. If you're lucky enough to exile a big creature, then Duplicate can become a threat to your opponent's life total. Karn can turn your board full of non-creature artifacts into an army of artifact creatures. Mirror Battlesphere creates mirror tokens that are great sacrifice fodder, and it can put pressure on your opponents, especially if you tap those mirrors for some extra damage. Pentavis brings an army of tokens that are both great sacrifice fodder and great chump blockers to protect Daretti, especially since before damage you can put the Pentavite back on Pentavis for 1 mana, so you can use that chump blocker cheese again for later. Not only is an 8/8 intimidating, but an 8/8 that makes you invincible is something your opponents must answer. Then you can just recur Platinum appearing back again, giving your opponents a small window of opportunity to do damage to you. This deck draws a lot of cards, mostly from Daretti's +2, so Psychosis Crawl will consistently do an annoying amount of damage to your opponents. Scuttling Doom Engine is a 6/6 beater that is annoying for your opponents to block, and even more annoying sacrifice fodder since one of your opponents will take 6 damage when it dies. Soul of New Phyrexia is a 6/6 trampler that can make all your permanents indestructible until end of turn from both the battlefield and the graveyard, which is an incredibly powerful ability. Squee, the Invincible God. Well, Squee is... Wait a second, get the flip out of here, Squee, you're garbage! Steel Hellkite is one of the most powerful artifact creatures in the deck. He's got evasion, can be pumped up, and can destroy your opponent's troublesome permanents. Wormcoil Engine is probably the best creature in the deck. It has decent stats, being a 6/6. It gives this deck some much appreciated life gain, and it gives you 2 useful tokens when he dies, providing you with a sacrifice fodder to bring Wormcoil Engine back from the grave. Artifacts aren't known for their sheer power. They're more known for their mana rocks and their utility that they bring to a deck. Here are some of the utility artifacts used in this deck. I usually use Clock of Omens and Voltaic Key to untap Nev's Disc so you can use it the turn it comes down. However, there are myriad things you can do, like give vigilance to your creatures or untap your mana rocks. Darksteel Forge makes it so exile is about the only thing that your opponents can do to deal with your artifacts. Even though 9 mana is a lot, remember that you'll probably cheat this card in the play using Daretti's -2. Why only have 1 copy of a card on the battlefield when you can have 2? Mirrorworks is also great at providing sacrifice fodder. Mycosynthelatus might seem innocuous. However, this card can do some real broken things in this deck that I'll go over later in the combo section of this video. Tangle Wire is used to slow down your opponents enough so you can get a few Daretti activations without him being bothered. Tomad's Crypt is great if you need sacrifice fodder as soon as you play Daretti and you don't have any leftover mana. I think every deck should have some graveyard hate, and Tomad's Crypt gets the job done nicely. Well, look at that. Trading Post is in this section too. Screw Daretti, just make Trading Post your commander. Unwinding Clock is the Seaborn Muse of artifacts. You'll be surprised just how useful an ability this truly is. It almost gives you an extra turn during your opponent's turns. Silent Arbiter is great when you need to protect Daretti against an entire army of creatures. These are cards that didn't fall under any of the previous categories. Just discard this giant red baby using Daretti's +2 and your creatures will have haste for the rest of the game. Slowbad protects your artifacts from removal by making them indestructible, and it can be used as a sacrifice outlet to protect your artifacts from exile. Blood Moon should be played in every mono red deck. It can single-handedly eliminate players with greedy mana bases from the game. Mindslaver is the funnest card in the deck for you and the least fun card for your opponents. It's actually fairly interesting playing out your opponent's turn, and oftentimes trying to sabotage them as much as possible, or use them to kill other players. This is a monocolored deck, so the land base isn't too complicated since it's mostly mountains. However, there are some utility lands worth mentioning. Ancient Tomb only producing colorless mana doesn't matter much in this deck since it's mostly colorless, and the 2 life cost to tap it is well worth it for the ramp. Buried Ruin gives a way to recur our artifacts. Command Beacon provides an efficient way to play Daretti if he costs too much mana thanks to command or tax. Darksteel Citadel and Great Furnace are artifacts you can sacrifice to Daretti in a pinch. Flamekin Village and Handwear Battlements give haste to your creatures, one of the most powerful benefits of playing red. High Market is a sacrifice outlet to protect your creatures from exile effects. Inventor's Fair gives this deck a much needed way to tutor up artifacts. Myriad Landscape is ramp attached to a land. Phyrexia's Core protects your artifacts from exile effects. This deck hardly ever gets to more than 7 cards in hand, but the opportunity cost of playing Reliquary Tower is so low that putting it in the deck is well worth it. Sanctum of Ugin is another tutor on a land. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods is a good version of Temple of the False God. This card helps you get the abundance of mana that you need in this deck. Strip Mine and Wasteland are great at destroying your opponent's problematic lands, and they have great synergy with Crucible of Worlds. Tomb of the Spirit Dragon gives the deck another much needed way of gaining life. These are the combos that are used in the deck. Darksteel Forger Soul of New Phyrexia plus Nev's Disc equals a one-sided board wipe. Destroy all your opponent's artifacts, creatures, and enchantments while keeping yours intact. And most importantly, keeping Nev's Disc around, giving you the option to use it again the next time you untap it. Darksteel Forger Soul of New Phyrexia plus Nev's Disc plus Mycosynth equals a one-sided board wipe that hits all your opponent's permanents, including lands, while yours are perfectly intact. And you can do it all over again when Nev's Disc untaps. This is the point when your opponents scoop. Mycosynth plus Vandalblast Overloaded equals destroy your opponent's permanents, including land, while leaving your permanents unscathed. Your opponent should probably scoop after this. Mycosynth plus Karn equals 1 mana, destroy target land. Since your opponent's lands are considered non-creature artifacts, you can turn them into an artifact creature with 0 power and toughness, which destroys that land, unless if they have some sort of anthem effect. Mindslaver plus Daretti's Emblem equals lock your opponents out of the game. First you take control of a player's turn, then Mindslaver comes back on each end step. So if you have 4 mana up, you can activate this artifact again, taking control of the next player's turn. This deck has a few ways of winning. One win condition is damage either through creatures or direct damage. The creatures in this deck will keep coming back. It's just inevitable that your opponents will die. You should focus on keeping yourself alive rather than being ultra aggressive towards players, which is strange for a mono red deck. They're usually about killing your opponents as quickly as possible. However, this deck is about resilience, surviving everything that your opponents throw at you with ease. Another win condition is Mindslaver. Even without using Daretti's Emblem, Mindslaver can easily win you the game, either by not letting your opponents do anything, or by forcing an opponent to kill off the other players at the table, or forcing them to draw until they die with Necropotence. That's always funny when that happens. The final win condition is using one of the combos mentioned in the combo section to either lock your opponents out of the game, or destroy all of their lands indefinitely. I want to thank you for watching my deck tech on Daretti Scrap Savant. I hope you enjoyed watching. I appreciate if you smash that like button, comment, and subscribe. And again, thanks for watching.